Good evening, guys. This is Ivan, and now I am here just doing a random video. These are some questions that I found online, and they are called the Throwback Tag, and it talks about, it basically involves answering questions of your childhood. So I'm going to be answering these questions for you and just, randomly throwing this out there. So let's begin. The first question says, and I'm actually here reading them off the computer. What year were you born in? I was born in 1981. I'm an 80s baby, and that should pretty much tell you how old I am. So do the math. Do you have any pictures of yourself from when you were younger? Actually, I do, and it's a coincidence because April 30th was Dia del Niño in Mexico, so I started posting some pictures up on Facebook. I don't know if you guys saw some of them, but I actually have some right here. Let me just go ahead and get them. Okay, so I have my pictures inside of this binder. This is actually like the first place that I always had them in. I know I need to get a new album and a better album to keep my pictures because I don't have the negatives anymore, so I can't make any more copies if these happen to be misplaced. But inside I have some pictures, and let me just show you some that I have here inside this little album, which is also like falling apart like horribly. But let me just show you some of the pictures that are in here. This is me. I probably should take it out. This is me. I think right here behind it, my grandma wrote, I was 15 days old. So that is the oldest picture of me there is in existence. So that's that. And here I am with my mom. Look at her 80s hair. She was a total 80s queen. Anyway, that's me, and I think that I was like some days old. I don't know how old I was there, but that's at my aunt's house. I have this other one. I had just taken a bath, and that is me at 5 months of age. So that's me, and this is me with grandma. This is me when I was 3 months old, and I was a happy baby. I think that I was by what my mom and my grandma tells me, I've always been like pretty calm. I was never like one of those babies that you just want to hit in the face to get them to shut up. But those are some of the pictures. I don't know how many more I should show, but those are the ones that were just here. Other pictures are this one. That was like a mini blackboard that I had, and I used to doodle on it, and that was actually my favorite chair. This is me eating with my uncle to my side and my grandpa in front of me. Actually, we still own that house. That house is where my grandma lives now. This is me driving my grandpa's car. I was sitting on his lap when they took this picture. So, and the second question, well, actually the third, what TV shows did you grow up watching? I remember watching, the usual Sesame Street, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. When I grew up a little bit more, I remember I used to love watching Reading Rainbow with LeVar Burton and all these shows about reading. PBS mostly. What I remember, other shows that I remember watching were DuckTales. I was a big DuckTales fan. And when I got older, Batman the Animated Series was always one of my favorite cartoons to watch. So I think that those are the shows that I remember the most watching. Okay, the fourth question, what did you want to be when you grew up, and do you still want to be that? Well, I'm grown up already, and I'm glad that I didn't go the route that I always thought I would go. Ever since I can remember, I always wanted to be a business administration major. I always wanted to be like a business owner or a manager or, just boss people around. I still do that sometimes, but no, I actually grew up and my interests changed. First, they went to computers, like you already know probably if you've seen my past videos. I used to be a computer science major in college. After that, I changed my mind, and after a series of tests and discussion with advisors and stuff like that, I became a communications major. Print media, which would be journalism in few words, but I also became a translator. So when I was little, I wanted to become something that I did not end up becoming, so that's pretty much it. The fifth question asks to show a video of myself when I was younger. We didn't own a video camera when I was growing up, so I really don't have any videos of myself except for the pictures that I just showed. What were your favorite toys to play with? I've always liked playing with stuff that is not very, rugged. I don't know how to say that. I was always like a very calm child. I did have little friends in my neighborhood that I used to play with, and we would play hide and seek, stuff like that. But when I was by myself, I always liked toys that kept me engaged and that pretty much allowed me to play quietly. I was never a loud child. I enjoyed playing with Legos, and I loved Legos when I was little. My mom would always buy me like the little Lego play sets, and I would spend hours on end, putting stuff together, building stuff, cars, houses, and stuff like that. As I grew older, I started collecting action figures. I remember that Batman has always been like one of my favorite characters. So I would always, buy or have my mom buy me like Batman action figures. I also bought a lot of X-Men action figures, and I would get into like these convoluted stories. I would make up characters, and I would have the action figures play them, and I had all these crazy things going on. So that's pretty much how I remember. I always used to play beyond what the characters were. I don't know how to explain that, but that's what I remember doing, or what I remember playing with when I was little. What's the most embarrassing thing that you can remember doing? I don't know. Embarrassing things? I can think of other things, but embarrassing? Oh yeah, I remember this time. I don't know how old I was. I mean, I wasn't like little. I think I was like older, like 11 or 12. And there's a McDonald's here in town. It's on Yarborough, on the corner of Yarborough and I-10. For those of you in El Paso, you'll know which McDonald's I'm talking about. And they used to have a caboose outside on the parking lot. And my mom, back then, she always wondered what was inside that caboose. And one time we went inside to eat, and then we came outside. And she was like, why don't you go in there and take a look? Like, maybe it's a museum or something. I don't know what my mom was thinking. So I went inside, and it turns out it was a children's party. It was like the party area for that McDonald's. So I walk in, and all these people like just turn around and stare at me. I remember this fat man that was just sitting there in front. And he just turns and looks at me, and I was like, oops, excuse me. And that was actually my most embarrassing moment of my childhood, because I came out and I was all like mad at my mom. I was like, how could you make me do that and whatever? And she was just laughing, But I remember that every time that we pass by that place, we always think back to the caboose, and like how embarrassed I was when I walked into it. So that, I think, would be one of the most, if not the most mortifying event of my childhood. Read something you wrote when you were in kindergarten. Again, I don't have things that go way back. I do remember about kindergarten. I think that I've always been like very spoiled, and I mean, I'm not ashamed to say it, because that's how everything went down. My grandma was always by my side throughout my school years, well into college. I remember that I was always very protected, and I was always very, taken care of by her. And I remember that through kindergarten, she would actually stay with me, with the class, and she would help the teacher, and she would help with the kids and stuff like that. So I remember that about kindergarten. All throughout kindergarten, I was fortunate enough to go to this place where they actually taught you to read, and I came out reading, so everybody was amazed that a 4-year-old could read. I don't know why, but I think it's pretty common nowadays. But that's I think what I can remember regarding kindergarten. So maybe that'll substitute what I used to read. The next question, 3 songs you loved to listen to as a child. The earliest thing that I can remember, gosh, my mom says that back when I was little, we didn't have a car, so we would always take public transportation or buses. And my mom says that they would play, Mexican people will know who I'm talking about, Lucia Mendez on the radio, and that I would sing her songs. I would just sing, in the bus, and people would like clap when I finished, and it was just a random thing that I happened to do when I was little. Other things that I can remember, my mom used to tell me that I loved singing to Stevie Wonder. I don't know, like, it was that song, I Just Called to Say I Love You, and that whenever that song would come on the radio, I would just start belting it out, The other song, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, I remember that when that would come out, I remember I would sing that song. So I think those are the 3 songs that I remember singing when I was little. The next question, what was one funny thing you dressed up for Halloween or when you were younger? I remember during kindergarten, we had like a little costume party, and I dressed up as Donald Duck, and it was just one of those flimsy drugstore kind of costumes, the ones that have like the face of the character, and then the little pullover thingy. It's like the face of the character, you know, it's like redundant. So I remember dressing up like that. Other costumes that followed, I mean, since my grandma was, she knew how to sew, she would make most of these costumes for me. So the next costume that I remember very well was Merlin, the magician. So she made like this huge cone and she put like stars and moons on it and the big beard, you know, so she made that for me. And other things, I was the Joker. I was in love with Batman, like I already said. So I was the Joker one year, and then I was the Penguin. I think I remember I was a vampire as well. I think the vampire was before the Penguin. But yeah, those are the things, excuse me, that I remember dressing up as. Next question. Tell a funny story or something you remember happening when you were young. When I was little, some of you may already know this, people who know me very well. When I was little, I had cousins that lived in Mexico City. And I remember that when I was like 5 or 6, they came and moved over to Juarez. And then, you know, my aunt came with them and my uncle. And, you know, since my aunt was from over there, she knew different styles of cooking, you know. And at that point in my life, I remember liking fish sticks, you know, the ones that come in the box. And that was pretty much the only idea that I had about fish. So one day, my aunt comes to us and tells us, "Oh, I'm going to cook fish for you." And I'm like, okay. So here in my 6-year-old mindset, I was thinking I'm going to get fish sticks, you know. But then she serves me like this big fish, like this whole fish just fried, you know, with the eyes and everything. And I remember telling my mom, "I don't want to eat this, you know, this is not fish." And she's like, "Just eat it and be quiet." And I'm like, "No, I don't want to eat it." So it was just so funny that I really did not make the connection between processed fish and the actual thing. So I thought that was just like, I don't know, it was just so disconcerting for me. Wanting to eat a whole fish. And I don't know if I did, I remember that, but that was like a funny thing that happened to me, you know, not making that connection. I kind of thought that it was kind of interesting because of my age. I don't know. The next question, are there any special things you've kept from when you were a child? I guess it would just be my toys. I know that I still have some toys over there back home with my grandma. Like I said, I used to collect a bunch of things. I do remember pogs or tazos if you're Mexican. I do have my collection there somewhere in a box, and I remember we would go crazy for them. We would just buy, like, they came out in like bags of potato chips, and I remember that my friends and I would just go crazy for them and collect them. And we would spend like a bunch of our lunch money and stuff on those. So I do remember those, collecting them, and you know, trading cards, typical stuff like that that I still hold on to. I don't have it here with me, but you know, I do remember collecting that when I was younger. What was something weird you used to do as a child? I actually have the perfect weird thing to talk about. I remember that, you know, when you're little, you get out of school like super early, so I would spend my afternoons, you know, at home. And, you know, my grandma would take care of me while my mom was at work. And I remember that she used to have, and if you know about this, you know, feel free to leave a comment down below. My mom had this face mask, and it was from a brand, I don't know if they sell it here in the United States. It's called Jafra. And it was like a mint exfoliating mask, you know. And I remember that, you know, it was just so attractive to me, you know, the smell of mint. So when my grandma would go to sleep, like when she would take a nap or something, I would stay up and I would like eat the mask. It's actually kind of embarrassing for me to say that, but yeah, I remember eating that, and it would just taste like mint. I never got sick of it, you know, I would never eat like the whole thing, but I remember doing that, like when she was sleeping the afternoon, I would dip my finger into it and just go like that, and I would taste it. And it was just grainy because it was like an exfoliating thing. So I remember eating that, and I just think of it as like a funny thing. I don't know. That was just like a funny thing that I used to do when I was younger. The next question, what's the scariest thing you remember that happened to you when you were younger? I remember that we had this cassette player. You know, we had this thing, and I wanted to play it, you know. So my mom and my grandma were in the living room watching TV, and they were like, "No, you can't play it," and blah blah blah. So then they told me off. And I started, you know, I got very upset. So when I got to where the tape player was, you know, I yanked the cord off the socket in the wall. And back then we had carpet underneath this area. So as soon as I pulled on the cord, it sparked. You know, it created like an explosion, like an electrical thing. And the rug caught, and the carpet caught fire. So I burned my hands, you know. I don't really know why I burned my hands. But then I yanked it off, and I guess I knocked out the power in my house and the neighbor's house, because they came out running, and as soon as they heard me screaming, I was like, help, help, and I had my hands all burned, and then they came to help me, and I was just screeching, and that's, I think, the scariest thing. It's funny now, but back then I can imagine, like, my mom seeing me with my burnt hands. And I remember that for the longest time we had that burnt spot on the carpet. And I remember having my hands with bandages in kindergarten, but, not caring about anything at all. I was, like, playing on the dirt the next day with them. So I think that must have been pretty scary for my mom. I don't know. I didn't have any consequences or marks in my hands, but that's just something that happened, and I would classify as scary back then. The final question: how is the world now different from how it was when you were a child? I think that it's very different. I still come from the generation, I'm pretty sure that you've seen that post on Facebook, that I used to do this when I was little, and I used to run around till 10 p.m. and blah, 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 and that is exactly how I feel. I think that generations have changed a lot since when I was little. I do remember playing out on the street till like very late, and my mom not worrying about it. She knew who I was with. I ran, I scraped my knees, I drank tap water, I drank from like a hose down the street. I played with dirt and stuff like that. So I do have good memories of my childhood. I think that children nowadays do miss out on a lot of things outside, mainly because of video games and other activities that keep them indoors. But I do remember that everything used to be more wholesome. I don't think that people used to be so PC about so many things. Now you have to wonder as a parent who your children are with during the day, teachers, adults next to them. So I think that back then, people were a lot more trusting. People were better at raising their kids. I don't know why I'm saying that, but I do feel that sometimes kids do need to be spanked in order for them to learn. And I was spanked, and I turned out fine. I wasn't beaten up with a belt every day, but, ever so often you do have to keep your kids under control. And I do come from a generation like that. I respected my authorities. I respected the adults around me. I never talked back to anyone. So I think that that's one of the main differences that I can think of. Plus the fact that, we grew up in a very different environment, in that regard. So I guess that's the difference that I can see. Okay, so that is the end for these questions, these throwback tag questions. I hope you guys like this. I don't know, I hope you find it funny or distracting for whatever reason. Don't forget to rate, comment, and subscribe to this blog if you find it interesting. And I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.